Okay, when working with rational expressions, we need to be able to simplify them, and we're going to learn how to multiply and divide them. But thinking about a simplest form of an expression, and in the simplest form is it's down to its prime values, or should I say, if I were to take 2 over 4, that is equivalent to 1 half. And 1 half would be the simplest form in which to write, or the correct form in the simplest form of 2/4. And if we wanted to think about that as common factors, well, 2 over 4 is equal to 2 times 1 over 2 times 2, and it looks like 2 is common factors of both the numerator and the denominator. So these 2 over 2 becomes the value of 1, and you end up getting 1 half. So just looking at some of those things, the very basics right now, that is sort of how we're going to apply those when we get into rational expressions, because we want to simplify them. We want to make things easier. So as I look at this example A, I have what is the rational expression in its simplest form? I can look at this and I know that I have some of the things that I can simplify. I have 24 over negative 6. I also have x to the third over x to the second, and times I also have then y squared over y to the third. And I guess I should have put that down here. And what we can do now is we can go ahead and we can go ahead and now simplify by getting rid of some of those common factors. And in doing so, let's look at, we know that 24 and negative 6, that should become equal to 4 over negative 1. And then x to the third over x to the second. Again, this becomes simply x to the first over 1. X to the first over 1 times, let's see here, y squared over y to the third, and that's going to become 1, and this is going to become y to the first, so that is going to become 1 over y, and then when we combine everything back, we're going to have a negative 4x over y, and that is the simplest form of that expression. Again, so we are simplifying things to make it a little bit easier to work with. And there you go. And let's look at the next example. We have what appears to be two quadratic equations, and you should be able to factor at this point in time. So we can turn around and take those and factor those into that numerator is going to factor into x plus 4 and x minus 2. And when we factor the denominator, we are going to have x minus 2 times x minus 3. And again, we're going to eliminate those common factors. So I can eliminate x minus 2 divided by x minus 2 is going to be 1. So now my new simplest form of this equation is simply going to be x plus 4 over x minus 3. There we go. We have simplified that expression. And coming over to this next expression, let's see. We can do some factoring here. Hopefully you guys can see there's a greatest common factor in our numerator. And what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go ahead and reorder my numerator just out of, being standard. So my numerator is going to be negative 4x plus 12 over x squared minus 9. Now, let's see, what can I do to find the greatest common factor in my numerator? Well, each one of those expressions in my numerator are going to be divisible by, or I can divide negative 4 away from them, and that gives me x minus 3. Negative 4 times x minus 3, and then my numerator or denominator you should recognize as a difference of squares. So that is x minus 3 times x plus 3. And now that we have got some prime factors out there, we can go ahead and do some simplification. And I know that x minus 3 over x minus 3 is the value of 1, so I can simplify that. And my answer turns out to be just negative 4 over x minus 3. So we have simplified some expressions. Not very difficult, again, being able to do a couple of the math skills, multiply, divide, and so forth. Let's see here. Now, multiplying rational expressions. When you multiply a fraction, you multiply straight across. But believe it or not, before we multiply, what is the product, before we are going to multiply, I want to go ahead and factor and get rid of some stuff. So by eliminating our common factors, it will make the problem easier for me. So if I take this first expression, and I'm going to factor right here, this expression is going to, the numerator is going to be 2 times x minus 4 over, again, the difference of squares, we see x minus 4 and x plus 2 times, and factoring out the numerator of the other expression should be x plus 1 and x plus 4, or x plus 1 times x plus 4 are going to be my factors. And then the denominator, we should recognize that as the sum of squares, or not sum of squares, but actually, yeah, so we have x plus 4 divided by, or times x plus 4. Okay, so, gosh, I did this wrong, sorry, right here. That should be, I don't know what I was thinking, x plus 4, x minus 4. Okay, so what can simplify here? And simplify, I know x minus 4, and x minus 4 becomes 1. I know that x plus 4 divided by x plus 4, that becomes 1. So what I have left over is just multiply everything across. I have 2 times x plus 1 over, looks like x plus 4 squared. And there you go, we have it in simplest form. Are there any restrictions? Well, restrictions mean what can, x not equal? Well, x cannot equal, if you look over here, we eliminated this expression right here. And that is x minus 4. That tells me that if x is 4, the term would become undefined because my denominator would be 0, and that's unacceptable. So x cannot equal 4. And we also know that x can't equal negative 4, but that expression is still available to you. Okay, so that is multiplying expressions. We want to factor, simplify, then multiply. We can do the same thing right here. Let's look at division. The only thing with division is you have to remember that division, well, when you divide a factor, actually what you're doing is multiplying by the reciprocal. So if we were to rewrite this, I have x squared plus 5x plus 4 over x squared plus x minus 12 times, remember, it's going to be my reciprocal. So it is going to be 2x squared minus 6x over x squared minus 1. Okay, now I'm ready to go back and do exactly what we did when we multiplied, and that was going to factor, simplify, then multiply. So as I factor the numerator right here, that is going to become x plus 4, x plus 1. If you're having difficulty factoring at this point in time, you need to go to tutoring because it is something that you should be able to do comfortably now. The denominator is going to be x plus 4, x minus 3. Again, multiplying by greatest common factor here in this expression is going to be 2x, and then that leaves behind x minus 3. And finally, this denominator is the difference of squares, so that would be x minus 1 and then x plus 1. Now all we have to do is do some simplification, do some cancellation. So we know that x plus 4 divided by x plus 4 is 1. We know that x minus 3 divided by x minus 3 is 1. And you may be asking yourself, how did you do that? Well, technically, this is all multiplication. So it's all the same problem. And let's see, what else can I cancel out? Oh, I can cancel out x plus 1 over x plus 1. And the only thing that I have left when I rewrite this problem is going to be 2x divided by x minus 1. I actually do not have anything to multiply by. So there we go. I just rewrote the problem, and that is its simplified form. So again, anytime we're dealing with rational expressions, we want to factor and simplify. We want to, in multiplication, we want to factor, simplify, and multiply. And in division, we want to make sure that we multiply by the reciprocal, and then we are going to go ahead and factor, simplify, and multiply. And that is rational expressions in a shell. Again, basic skills here, you need to be able to factor. If you can't factor at this point in time, you're going to have to seek some additional help, because we have gone over it and gone over it and gone over it, and you have experienced it in many different levels of algebra,